Hello. This week's episode is different than any other. It's different from what I originally had planned for you this week. What I originally had planned is an excellent roundtable discussion that I am still looking forward to sharing with you next week, featuring Nicholas Blooms, Leighton, and Bob Withers. So, two detransitioners and an elder therapist with many years of experience working with transition regret. I'm still looking forward to sharing that episode with you, and I hope you'll listen when it comes out. But something came up this week that caused me to break from my usual pattern of how I plan and record podcasts. I needed to address an issue that came up. When I began recording the monologue that you're about to hear, I didn't know how long it was going to take me. It ended up taking an hour, and that's why I decided to turn it into a complete podcast episode instead of just a video to post on Twitter or X in response to an issue that arose on that platform. So the purpose of this week's episode is to address the situation that unfolded on the internet. I'm going to explain what that is in a moment. As a marriage and family therapist, I am trained in something called family systems theory. I'm trained to think of problems holistically in the context of the family, the social and physical environment, the biological and physical aspects, and most importantly, perhaps, the interpersonal or relational aspects of a problem. This is how I'm accustomed to helping people, and traditionally in my field, when a member of a family had a condition such as anorexia, addiction, obsessive compulsive disorder, or numerous other mental health concerns, family therapy was seen as a valuable intervention that helped the entire family come together to recognize how everyone in the family was constellated around the issue of the identified patient. Sometimes the entire family would have to readjust or reposition themselves in order to support resolution of the presenting problem. I think it's a shame that we've lost our way in my field and that we can't use this traditional family therapy approach in the treatment of gender-related issues. This is part of the reason that I have stepped away from doing therapy for the time being, and it's part of the reason that I am working on resources outside of therapy that are influenced by my background in family systems theory, 11 years of experience providing psychotherapy, as well as 3 years before that of studying it. I believe that in order to solve the gender crisis, there are a number of factors that we need to look at, and some of those factors might take us to some difficult and painful places to look at. You might call these the shadow or the hidden parts of ourselves, our blind spots, the parts that we repress and deny, the parts that we don't want to look at because they're painful or shameful. And I've walked with parents through these difficult places in my work as an ROGD parent consultant. Within the context of developing these resources, primarily aimed at supporting and empowering parents who are suffering, certainly not trying to make anyone suffer more. Within that context, I put out a call to action on the internet recently that blew up in my face. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. The ripple effects of that and a number of issues that I think they're connected to that address the nature of the beast we're up against in fighting gender ideology and how we are all impacted. The thing I said that seemed to have upset a lot of people, including the types of people I care about helping, was a request for anonymous feedback from anyone who felt like they had had a negative experience or multiple negative experiences with ROGD parents in the past, parents of youth with rapid onset gender dysphoria. It was never my intention to cause anyone pain. It was my intention to gather information that could be helpful for people who are choosing to go through the challenging process of doing whatever it takes to save their kids, and who are willing in the process to think in a holistic manner and consider those possible blind spots of what they might not be seeing about themselves and their role in things as one small part of the picture. In the process of saying what needed to be said in today's episode, I get more vulnerable than I've ever been on this show, more vulnerable than I probably ever will be on this show. And I talk about a lot of things that I think might be emotionally impactful for anyone who has also been affected by this issue. I invite you to feel along with me and to stare into the dark heart of this beast that we are fighting together. I also want to state up front my request. I am asking for an hour of your time before you cast judgment on me. I know that asking of an hour of your time is a big request. If you're somebody who already, for any reason, feels put off by me or felt bothered by what I said, it might be the last thing that you want to do. I understand if you don't want to make it to the end of this. All I would ask is that you consider withholding judgment and consider the weight of your words if you choose to speak about me to other people, having made the decision not to hear what I have to say on this. This episode was not produced in the same way my episodes are typically produced because it was produced very last minute. It felt important to put out a statement very quickly following the recent events. So the editing is choppy, the audio levels might sound different. Everything about this is different. Me breaking down crying on camera is certainly different. If you've ever wanted to know how I really feel, or if my heart is in this, if you've ever wanted to see me cry, now is your opportunity. I ask you to be patient with me as I sort through these matters and eventually get to some places within me that are vulnerable, but also some places within our entire community that are vulnerable. I think you might find pieces of yourself and your family's situation reflected in what comes up for me in this episode. So I appreciate your listening and your willingness to take the time to hear what someone has to say fully before casting judgment on that person. I hope that this message alleviates some of the searing pain that seems to have been brushed up against for some people. And I hope that ultimately it aids in healing and finding a way forward together.
You must be some kind of therapist.
Hi everyone, I'm doing something different, recording a video about the nerve that I hit recently and the ripple effects of me hitting that nerve unintentionally. I'm not in the best space to record this video because I'm still hurting from some of the mean things that were said to me and about me. I understand that the people who said these things probably felt like it was a justified counterattack because of the perception that I was attacking people who are already hurting. That was not my intention. I do know how much ROGD parents are in pain. The irony is that all of this wouldn't have happened if I didn't have great relationships with a lot of ROGD parents. So the context in which this is occurring is that I've set aside my therapy practice. Health issues were placing strain on me to decide what were the most important parts of my career to keep and which to let go of or put on pause. I decided several months ago that helping ROGD parents through the consulting services that I provide is one of the most important uses of the limited time and energy that I do have. So I'm helping ROGD parents in a consulting role for the last several months while working on additional resources for them, which I'm not ready to share about with the public. And that's part of the context here. Further background for those of you who may not know, I went to graduate school for counseling psychology from 2010 to 2013. Between 2013 and 2016, I was an intern at various community mental health jobs in California and Oregon. I was in group practice 2016 to 2020, been in private practice since 2020. And I've been outspoken for the last few years and have been known for taking a stance against gender ideology and its infiltration of the counseling field. In the last few years, ROGD parents have been coming to me increasingly for help, and I realize the type of help they need really falls outside the boundaries of psychotherapy. It's much more directive advice, skills, information, knowledge, communication techniques, and so on. I've been studying this beast pretty intensely for the past few years. I'm pretty well suited to orient people who are feeling lost in all of this. I have great relationships with my consulting clients. That consulting relationship is a lot different than this thing we're doing here on social media. I'm sitting here talking to a camera in a room by myself. Tweeting is devoid of a lot of relational context, nonverbal communication. So for context, the bulk of what I do is have intimate conversations with people over video, one or two people at a time, really slowing down, getting into detail. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have those great relationships. That's the background here. It's my relationships with my consulting clients and the fact that they have told me again and again how helpful my guidance has been that compels me to do this work of continuing to develop resources for RGD parents. But what I'm either working on privately or what comes up in the context of those intimate conversations where people trust me, where they're sharing details, where I'm, helping them brainstorm and strategize, like that doesn't translate into social media. And I'm not here on social media to tell people every single detail of everything I'm doing. Like there's no way to explain it. And as far as the project I'm working on, I have found that it hinders my creative process to tell people too much too early on when I'm working on something big. Like I need to keep it to myself and just keep working. All of that being said, here's what's going on. I'm working on a project. I'm not going to tell you the full details of it, but it is designed to put together everything I know that I think is helpful, that parents tell me, that parents tell me has been helpful. It's about understanding the psychology of the gender cult, how it's infiltrated your family, looking at the cracks where it's gotten in, understanding ways that you might be winning the battle to lose the war, and helping parents change their strategy to really take into account their child's psychological state and their developmental level. I have a list of examples of things. I just went back through my week. What have I talked to about people this week? Here's an example of some of the types of things that I've helped people with this week. Helped a father whose wife is concerned, but pressuring him to use his son's new name and pronouns, articulate his reasons to her about why he believes holding the line will be better in the long run. Helped a mom figure out how to invite her daughter to help her cook as a way of sharing quality time and teaching her life skills while getting her off of screens. Helped parents understand how their son's pornography addiction may have evolved into strange territory that could be contributing to his identification as a girl. Helped parents identify tools for teaching their daughter critical thinking skills and getting her interested in applying cognitive behavioral therapy tools to day-to-day life. Helped a father of two girls understand how his comments about one girl's weight may be contributing to the other girl's attempts to reject her own femaleness. Helped parents identify questions they can ask their son to encourage him to share what he sees as the advantages of being female. Helped parents identify ways they might broach the subject of changes in their son's body since he began estrogen in ways that welcome the son to get in touch with his own uncertainty about this decision. Helped parents recognize a gap in appropriate role models for their son and begin identifying ways to address this gap. Helped a mom reflect on the hidden significance of her daughter's chosen name and what it reflects about an underlying ambivalence about fully separating from her femaleness. Helped parents draft a carefully worded text message to reestablish connection with an estranged son. And helped parents identify how to set new limits with regard to accessing technology, asserting clear boundaries, using strategic apologizing so as to absorb some of the blow of their daughter's inevitable disappointment and frustration with the decision to remove technology access. So that was just a bullet point list that I wrote when I needed to kind of reflect on my week. What is it that I do? So I hope that gives you a little bit of a screenshot. a little bit of a window into what I'm talking about. I also have a recent episode of my podcast you can listen to if you're interested, episode 109, where I talk about the work that I do with parents, and I think that should give you a window. So that's the context in which this is all occurring. The project that I'm working on sort of compiles all those things that have thematically come up. It's aimed at picking up where other books and podcasts and things like that leave off, and really focusing on, what are questions you can ask yourself to figure out the best approach to addressing these issues in your family. The goal of the project overall is to help and empower families. It's not for people who have given up, and it's not grief support, it's not counseling, it's not therapy. It's really like you are in that fight and you're not giving up and you want all the tools you can possibly use. It's for people who are in that space. Obviously, it's not for people who believe that the only people who can help them are other parents who've been through it, because I'm not an ROGD parent. I don't believe that one necessarily has to have had that lived experience in order to understand and be able to help with this issue. If you are of that belief, I respect that that is your decision. You probably feel that way for a reason. And it's probably also a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you believe I can't help you, then I can't help you. So I'm not, you are not my audience, and that's fine. Like, I want everyone to get the support that is right for them. But a lot of people have reported that my work is helpful to them. So I keep going. Okay. So within a project that's overall aim is to support, empower, and educate parents who want all the help they can get, and help them identify specific strategies to use when communicating with their own child. That is the point. Okay. One small part of that is about looking at your own shadow. And the inspiration for this particular thing that ended up blowing up was that it has now happened to me multiple times, that in the context of some private exchange with someone, because I talk to a lot of people as a podcaster and just a networker and, colleague and friend. Someone has said something about having personal difficulties dealing with ROGD parents. I'm not singling anyone out. I'm not interested in bad-mouthing anyone. This is not about that whatsoever. But my thought was, most of the parents I work with are eager for anything that can help and totally willing to look at their part of it. I don't encourage people to beat themselves up. And when people are beating themselves up, I try to help them out of that. I reassure people, you could have done everything right and still lost your child to this cult. I tell people what I think they're doing well. I try to give them encouragement. I point to signs of hope, signs that their kid isn't maybe fully bought in, that there's some kind of connection left. So I try to give people a lot of supportive reinforcement. But it's not just about consoling and comforting them. I think for parents who do feel completely estranged, or that their child is completely lost to them, they need a different type of support than this. They need support from other parents, maybe grief counseling. So my resource, though, is for people who still have an ounce of hope left in them and want to do everything they can. And so this particular part of this resource was an invitation for anyone who felt like they have seen certain character traits in some ROGD parents, an invitation to give brutally honest feedback, anonymized, so nobody gets hurt, not trying to hurt anybody, not trying to destroy anybody's reputation. And my goal is to put that into one section. So people have to opt in twice. They have to opt in to pursuing this resource I'm developing in the first place. I'm not forcing this on anyone. And then they have to opt into looking at that particular section of it. And this is saying, hey, this is not about you. In fact, I don't know who this is about. This could be anyone. And take it with as big of a grain of salt as you need. Obviously, I'm not going to include anything that's totally outlandish or just hurtful without being helpful. I'm going to include things that I think have the potential to be helpful. And then it's like, take it with whatever grain of salt you need. This may or may not apply to you, but here is an experience that one person reports having with another person. And maybe there's something in it to help you reflect on your shadow. There's a big difference between inviting people who are ready and willing to do that shadow work and look and see, is there anything in this for me? There's a huge difference between that and blaming parents, which I was accused of doing, or trying to hurt them. Absolutely not my intention. I'm really torn between apologizing for the hurt that some people felt and feeling defensive of myself because I know what my intentions were, and I think that's a bad faith interpretation. So this leads me to my dilemma, which is I am someone who gravitates toward shadow work in general. I'm someone who gravitates towards things that are taboo, things you're not supposed to talk about, touching the third rail or the elephant in the room, whatever metaphor you want to use. I am somebody who is just drawn to that like a moth to a flame, no matter how much I keep getting hurt, because it's just part of my destiny, I guess. And maybe the world needs people who are ready to go there. And so, as part of this, I have wandered into some of the most hurting people in the world, detransitioners and RGD parents. And inevitably, periodically, in my work addressing these two populations, I end up massively receiving this blowback of just what feels like tremendous pain that I was not trying to make worse for anyone. But if someone has just been beaten up all over their body and you lightly brush their arm, that's going to feel like searing pain. And their first reaction is probably going to be to scream and maybe kick you. So I've been in that situation where I've hit a nerve, and I've done it again. And it's not because I'm a sadist. If you're determined to see me as some kind of sadistic, terrible person who's just out to get you, or that I'm out to lure you in by pretending to be sympathetic to your issues and talking about the issues and like, haha, I've got you. Actually, it's all your fault. That seems to be what some people think I was trying to do with this. I find that hard to reconcile, that people would come to that conclusion if they are familiar with my work, because I've talked about this gender issue from so many angles. And I've expressed tremendous sympathy for the parents and the detransitioners and everyone caught up in it. And I have talked about the things that are contributing and who I hold responsible for this. So again, I'm feeling defensive, like I'm hurting. I'm a person with my own limits. It doesn't feel fair to me. It hurts to be seen in this way. At the same time, I want to acknowledge that I am seen this way by some people. And that there's the perception that I derive some kind of pleasure from hurting people. It's not true. You're free to not believe me. If you don't believe me, probably best for everyone that you just maybe step away. Interaction between us is not going to be healthy for either of us. And I want everyone ultimately to get the support that's right for them. And I'm not everyone's cup of tea. So that's fine, but I just want to acknowledge, for what it's worth, that I am not trying to hurt people. I wander into places where people are hurting. And I do that because I care. And I did drop a lot of other things to focus this chapter of my career on helping ROGD parents, because it just feels like the most important thing. It feels like the best use of my knowledge and skills. And to be honest, all the parents who come to me for help give me really good feedback. So there is definitely a disconnect between the experience that people are having of me in that intimate setting when they're inviting me in to understanding their family and, helping them choose a direction, and the wild, wild world of the internet. Some people have raised the question, was Twitter the best place to do this? The easy way out for me would be to say I shouldn't have used Twitter. I'm going to be honest, though. It's a really mixed bag, because that is by far the easiest place to get lots of people to chime in on something. And of course, it backfired on me. The thing that lots of people wanted to chime in on is how awful I am and how hurtful my behavior is. I am extremely careful when it comes to other people's reputations because I know how hurtful reputation damage can be. And every time someone has tried to attack my reputation, things were usually like really twisted out of context. And so I'm also very skeptical when people speak ill of others. I'm usually like, how has this maybe been spun? And I also just generally don't believe in participating in patterns of idealization and devaluation of others because I prefer to see others as equals. I myself would never throw someone under the bus like the way I've been thrown under the bus. So if you are one of those people that's decided to see me in a negative light, this part probably won't go over well with you. If you're open to some of my reflections on what this has brought up. There is this concept of the drama triangle, sometimes called the Karpman drama triangle, named after the person who coined the idea, and it's made up of victim, rescuer, and perpetrator. And the idea is that whenever you have drama, usually all three of these roles are present. People who have been victims in the past often themselves tend to gravitate toward rescuer roles. I know, that's a narrative from my past. I certainly felt victimized and then took on the role of rescuer, and I've had to learn to get out of the drama triangle. I've had numerous learning opportunities in the course of my life about those dynamics. People who are either victims or rescuers, people who are aligned with those roles, when they either feel protective of themselves as a victim or protective of others as a rescuer, tend to feel justified in lashing out and hurting others and can therefore become the perpetrator, even though most people are not aligned with that role. There's a very small minority of the population that identifies as perpetrators, that thinks of themselves as that way. People with like antisocial personality disorder who openly take pleasure in hurting other people. But for the vast majority of people caught up in any kind of drama, that part of them that is the perpetrator is a part that they're blind to. Why? Because they feel justified as a victim or as a rescuer. And I think what happened is that I was not intending to create drama triangle dynamics, but by pointing to something that is so adjacent to so much hurt for people, I was experienced as a perpetrator, and it triggered both victim and rescuer responses. And then I had the experience of feeling perpetrated against, and I'm still nursing my wounds from feeling victimized. Do you see how that works? So I try to get out of drama triangle stuff. And that is something that I help people with. That is something that I'm going to be speaking to in this project that I'm working on. But right now it feels like we're all kind of caught up in it together. I have noticed that it seems like there's a parallel process between the ways in which trans-identified people see themselves as an untouchable, unquestionable class of victims, and then become perpetrators, right? That's the part they don't want to see. It seems like there's a parallel between that. We're victims, we deserve special treatment, we need protection, and the way that some parents feel. And this is the part where I'm sure I'm going to piss a lot of people off again. And I'm not trying to piss people off. And I'm not trying to call anyone particular out. And I don't know the particulars of your circumstance. But I know that sometimes there's a fine line between giving yourself the support that you need to feel your hurt when you have been victimized. There can be such a fine line between that and allowing your sense of victimization to overtake your identity and obscure your perception of a situation. This is something that we are all vulnerable to under stress. But the narrative that RGD parents are victims is something I both agree with and disagree with. It's not a black and white either or thing. Are they hurting? Absolutely. Do I agree that most parents are doing the best they can? I agree. I get it, okay? But I there is a fine line between feeling your hurt and grieving and acknowledging the ways in which what has happened to you is not fair. There's a fine line between that and, potentially going too far and erecting this boundary around yourself that says, I only have room for experiencing myself as a helpless victim. So I think that's what bumped up against by acknowledging the role of agency. And as I've talked with supportive people who have helped me process what happened over the last few days, someone pointed out that among the community of ROGD parents, some families are having success seeing signs of progress towards desistance for their kids, and some families aren't. And that if you are, let's say you're a parent who's been in that community a while and you see some other parents having more success than you, that can add to that sense of what am I doing wrong, and that like beating yourself up that people felt like I was somehow trying to make worse for them, which I really was not trying to make worse for anybody. And so I can imagine from that perspective it being triggering, not only for me to be talking about the things you can do, which is what my focus is on, because I am here to help people strategize, but not only to talk about what you can do, but to do it in a way that says, maybe it has to do with that thing in yourself that you're the most ashamed of. I don't know what that thing is for you, but I know when our deepest shame is triggered that it can create a massive reaction. I don't know what your deepest fear is about what's wrong with you and how much that's connected to your fear that that's the real reason that this happened to your kid. I don't have an answer to that because I don't know your situation. But here's what I think the truth is. Your kid could not have ended up here without this massive global agenda. Your kid couldn't have ended up here without the social contagion, the cult dynamics, the unscrupulous doctors and politicians and everyone else who made this possible. And if you've been following me for a while, that I am very critical of my own profession and our hand in this. And that some of the consulting work I do is for therapists who are thinking about coming out and becoming whistleblowers. Your kid could not have ended up here without all of that. Am I saying it's all your fault? Absolutely not. Like, was all of this, all the work I've been doing just to lure you into this place being like, haha, it's all really your fault? No. And I hear and I see that some of you are experiencing me as this like projection of your own innermost inner critic, that devil on your shoulder that's like, I know what you know. I've dealt with my own shame. I know what that feels like when you feel like that innermost vulnerability is being attacked. And I hear and I see that for some of you, I have served as like a personification of that. That was not my intention. And I'm sorry for the hurt that you're feeling. It wasn't my intention to cause that hurt. I do believe that hurt preceded me, but I get that I hit a soft spot, a really vulnerable spot. Whatever shadow aspect there is for you to look at this, it's not to say it's all your fault. It couldn't have happened without all these other systemic factors, of course. But maybe that thing in you that brings up a lot of pain to look at, that thing that you've beat yourself up over, whatever it is, might have been the cause of some other problem for your kid or in your family relationship with your kid. Would it have resulted in this kind of harm coming to your kid? Probably fucking not. Like, it takes a really nasty death cult to make the stakes that high. And that's what's like the ugliest and nastiest thing about this whole thing, is that the stakes are so fucking high of making a mistake. And that's where my heart just breaks for everyone impacted by this, for the detransitioners and the parents. The fact that the stakes are so high for messing up, for being fallible, for being human, is just, it will make you believe in the devil if you do not believe in it already. So here's where I'm coming from. I'm one of those people who was like, I definitely would have been one of these kids. Like I had 60, 70, 80% of the traits of the exact kind of young person that gets caught up in this. I'm just lucky I was born when I was born. And I had a pretty rough adolescence and early adulthood, and there were a lot of dangers I narrowly escaped and some scars that I carry to this day from the things that went wrong in my early life. But I don't have the scars of a double mastectomy. I don't have the scars that these young people have now. And it makes me so angry that all it takes is one little moment of vulnerability. It could be as innocent as, here's an example of a story I heard, and I hope I'm not sharing anything too personal for anyone. But like a family who, like, their daughter was at summer camp and all the other girls were talking about which boys they thought were cute. And they asked her while she was like reading her book, because she's geeky, and she was like, huh? Boys? What? I don't get it. And she was like, I don't know, 11 or something. So she went home and Googled, why am I not like the other girls? And that's how she ended up thinking she was trans. The fact that a moment of vulnerability that small and that innocent can be exploited. There are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of examples of moments of vulnerability as innocuous as that one, where this ideology just comes in to take your child away from you. I have been through some shit, and my own vulnerabilities have certainly been exploited, and I have been scarred by it, but I have not been scarred like that. And I am somebody who believes in the power of transformation, redemption, forgiveness. I'm all about those things. It is so cruel how this sadistic movement seeps in and exploits every vulnerability so that there's no safe place to mess up anymore. One concept that I have used in therapy at times, that every now and then I use it in my parent consulting, is this idea of the sandbox versus the racetrack. We all need that sandbox where, you can throw a toy and like the worst thing that happens is you get sand in your eye. Like nothing too bad is going to happen from experimentation and play. We all need that in order to grow, in order to develop skills. And so much of that has been taken away from children. So for example, one family I talked to recently, their daughter just got a phone and she's obsessed with maintaining her Snapchat streak. And we were talking about, how do you walk back the access to technology? And one thing we were saying, like, how you could say to her that we're taking Snapchat away is like, since you got this phone, you've been so obsessed with maintaining your Snapchat streak that it's taken away from the things that used to bring you joy. And, when you're journaling or you're coloring, when you are immersed in your hobbies, your creative process, and you're not thinking about, how do I look and how do I take a picture of this and who's going to like the fact that I'm doing this, and is it cool? Is this a cool picture to share? Are people going to approve of this? Like, you are so happy, and there's so much that you get out of that process of just being yourself and exploring your interests. And we see your process being interrupted by this, self-scrutiny of exposing your innermost process to the world when you're in a process of so much transformation at your age. So we've taken away children's sandboxes, their safe spaces to play and explore, where the stakes are low, where nothing can go too wrong and you can mess up and be okay. You can scrape your knees. You can even break a bone. Like, I have a kid who just broke a bone recently, and thankfully I've read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, so I know that he's actually going to be better off for having broken that bone in childhood. But, by giving these kids access to technology and having the cult out there trying to destroy families, there are no sandboxes anymore. There's just racetracks, places where you are in the performance zone, you have to perform, and the stakes are high. So I think that's what I've walked into. The fact that there's so little room for error. There's so little room for just being a messy human. And so your kids are feeling it, and you're feeling it, and you're taking it out on me, and I'm feeling it too. I'm feeling like there's no room for my humanity, and the stakes are so high. But my point is that this is the nature of the beast. It's robbed us of our humanity and our innocence. It has made the stakes sky high. You can't mess up an inch as a young person. I mean, it is so innocent of a young person to repeat something that their friends said, or to repeat something that they heard on the internet. And these kids who are just repeating these things innocently, as kids do, have no idea that the moment they do that, they are recognized by this beast, this power hungry beast that just wants to extract the youthful innocence out of them. And they are, put on a conveyor belt through the system, and everyone and everything that would protect them has our hands barred by these demonic forces that are trying to cut us off from being able to protect children. So it's just so enraging that there's no room for kids to be kids. And then I think where it comes to what you're feeling as a parent and why so many of you got so angry with me is that it feels like there's no room for you to be human, for you to make mistakes, for you to be a less than perfect parent. So that's how we got here, I think. And it's fucked up. It's fucked up that you are here where you feel like you do have to scrutinize every single thing you do because the chance of getting it wrong is like literally life and death. It's fucked up, and it's keeping you awake at night, and it's breaking your heart, and it's making you feel insane. And it's making some of you be very mean to me on the internet, but that's the least of your worries. Yeah, it's messed up. And that's why I call it a tightrope marathon, because it is 26.2 miles on a tightrope, because the stakes are so high. But look, my intention is to help people who are ready to get to work and who want more resources. The families that tend to do the best, I can't tell you how much of a difference it makes to have a supportive marriage. If you're not in a supportive marriage, it's just so much harder. But when I've met a husband and wife who are just a great team and on the same page and love each other and communicate well, it's just, it makes everything so much easier. They show up so ready to hear anything I might say. They implement it. They come back the next week. They're like, here's how it went. Ready for more. So it's for those people who are showing up having had a good night's of sleep and a good meal and maybe a good cry or a good run or a good scream. And they have their supportive partner there by their side. Not always a requirement, but it certainly helps. Who are ready to look at things. Those are the people who are in the best place to do whatever we got to do. And that includes looking at your shadow sometimes. I'm not trying to hurt anyone with that. It's the more resourced you are, the better prepared you are to deal with it. But the consequences of whatever you are ashamed about in yourself or embarrassed about or not proud of, like the consequences of your personal flaws, any of them potentially being the cause of losing your child to a death cult, like that's an insane level of consequence that no one should have to feel for the flaws in their humanity. And that's why this, like I said, if you didn't believe in evil, this will make you believe in it. Because isn't that the nature of evil? To try to destroy our innocence. The problems that you have, your flaws, your shortcomings are innocent. I believe. I believe in grace. I believe in the power of grace and redemption and forgiveness. And this beast, will make you hate your every flaw Just like it's making your child hate his or her every flaw. I mean, it's making your child look in the mirror and see flaws that aren't there. It makes your child scrutinize him or herself and just turn every strength into a weakness. It's so evil. And so then it affects you, makes you the same way. Like, what could I have possibly done differently? And so I'm just here to say, yes, there is always truth that we could have always done something differently. And I am here to help the families who want to work on that because it's within the realm of what you can control. And you're still here to fight for your kids, so let's control what we can. But that doesn't mean that I think it's remotely fair that the consequences for your human flaws, which are fundamentally innocent and worthy of grace and forgiveness, should be like this. So I don't know what the solution is, but I know that it has to involve redemption. There has to be a way back for these kids. And so one of the things I say to parents is like, you can't have a black and white all or nothing attitude about like, if my child medicalizes, they're gone forever. Like, I work with parents whose children have begun to medicalize. The youngest child of a parent I talked to was 10 and the oldest was like 30. So that's a pretty big range. All types of family dynamics, you know, all types of other factors. And so everywhere on the medicalization spectrum, from like kids who are just maybe kind of thinking about it, but mostly just kind of like saying they're non-binary at school to fit in with their friends, which is like a much lower stakes situation than like, you know, right now, I have a lot of parents coming to me who are parents of college age boys who are taking estrogen. That's like a really common thing right now. And I say, like, you can't feel like all hope is lost. Like, you still have to be there to welcome them back at any point. And so how do we position you so that they're, you know, so that your kid is in the best, how do we position you so that you are most likely to be the one your kid turns to if they have a moment of doubt, if they want to like come say like, mom, dad, I think I made a mistake. Like, we want you to be there for them. And like one of the worst things you can do is like anything that would cut that off, because then your kid really is lost to you. And I've like had parents I walked back off the like I have helped parents, like I read in that list, like draft a text to invite their kid back into communication after total estrangement. So there has to be a way back. There has to be a path of grace and redemption. And you have to create it for your kids. We as a society have to create it for detransitioners and desisters. And I think there's so much pain because of that lack of grace. And that's the pain that I'm feeling because of the lack of grace that some people have had for me. We are fucked without grace. Like, I don't care if you're a religious person or not, but there's a reason that we gravitate towards religion. And I think grace is such an important element of that. I want us to create a world with grace, a world that protects innocence. And that means the innocence of children and young and vulnerable people, and that protects the innocence of just our flawed humanity. And a world that remembers that we can be loved and that we can be forgiven in spite of all of that. And the stakes were never meant to be this high. The stakes for being mistaken, the stakes for being hurt, the stakes for being deluded, the stakes for whatever the hell is wrong with you should never be this high. And I think the fact that I recently reached this point where I was like, I think I've dealt with my shame. It's what allows me to be sitting here talking to you, because you could point out anything about me anything true about me. There were some things that were said about me that were not true. And that hurts just because it's frustrating to have all that nastiness projected onto me. And because it's stressful and it has implications I have to deal with in terms of my reputation and the impact on other people. You could point out any true thing about me or my past, and I think that I would be able to have grace with myself about it. I want to have grace for you too. I want us to create a world of more grace, because the only way to get out of this crisis, and it's the only way for you to recognize who's on your side. Because you can have an attitude now that, like, you have your list of approved or trusted people and your list of people who have made it on your shit list, and you can play that game of moving people onto your shit list the moment they disappoint you, and maybe you moved me onto your shit list. But eventually there will be no one left. In a world without grace, in a world without understanding for our human foibles, in a world with only racetracks or performance zones and no sandboxes, everyone will inevitably disappoint you. All right. This is the most vulnerable thing I'm ever putting out there. Something needed to be said. We live in a world of a lot of pain. And I'm right here in it with you. And somehow we have to create a way forward. And I think it's with grace.